"Kiss me," she begged. "Someone's watching." The Duke kissed her. No one was there. The Marchioness of Kellingham's spring ball was, by universal agreement, the most dreadful crush of the season, which meant, of course, that it was an unqualified triumph. 300 guests pressed into rooms designed for half that number, the air thick with beeswax candles and French perfume, and the particular desperation of mothers with daughters to settle. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead, their light catching the diamonds at every throat and wrist, transforming the ballroom into something that glittered like a fever dream. Lady Georgiana Blackwell had positioned herself beside a potted palm near the terrace doors, where a merciful draught cut through the stifling heat and where she could observe the card-room without appearing to do so. Her gown was 3 seasons old, carefully retrimmed with new ribbon to disguise its age, and her mother's pearls lay warm against her throat, the only pieces that hadn't been sold to cover her father's latest disaster at the tables. She was not watching the dancing. She was watching her brother. Edmund stood at the hazard table, his fair hair dishevelled, his cravat askew, his face flushed with that particular combination of drink and excitement that made Georgiana's stomach clench with dread. He was 20 years old, and determined to prove himself a man in all the worst ways their father had modelled. At this distance, she could not see the cards or the dice, but she could read her brother's posture, the forward lean of desperation, the jerky movements of someone chasing losses rather than accepting them. "Lady Georgiana, you are hiding." She turned to find Mrs. Pemberton, a plump widow of comfortable means and uncomfortable curiosity, bearing down upon her with the determination of a ship of the line. "Merely catching my breath, Mrs. Pemberton." Georgiana arranged her features into pleasant neutrality, the expression she had perfected over years of social necessity. "The room is rather warm." "Warm? It is positively stifling. I told Lady Kellingham that she had invited too many people, but she would have her triumph, and now we all must suffer for it." Mrs. Pemberton snapped open her fan with practised violence. "I saw your brother at the card-room. He has his father's luck, I fear." The words landed like stones in still water. Georgiana kept her smile fixed. "Edmund enjoys a game now and then. What young man does not?" "Indeed, indeed. Though one hopes he enjoys it less expensively than the Earl." Mrs. Pemberton's eyes glittered with the pleasure of delivering a wound wrapped in concern. "There are whispers, you know, about Thornwood's finances. I do not listen to gossip, of course, but one cannot help but hear. How kind of you to mention it." Georgiana's voice could have frozen champagne. "If you will excuse me, I believe I see Lady Ashford waving." She did not see Lady Ashford waving. Lady Ashford was nowhere in evidence. But Mrs. Pemberton could not know that, and the lie bought Georgiana escape to push through the crowd toward the card-room, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. The card-room was smaller than the ballroom, but no less crowded. The air blew with tobacco smoke despite Lady Kellingham's posted prohibitions. Men clustered around green baize tables, their faces cast in shadow and lamplight, their voices a low rumble punctuated by the click of chips and the whisper of shuffled cards. A few women lingered at the edges, wives keeping watch on husbands, but this was fundamentally a masculine space, and Georgiana felt the weight of disapproving glances as she pressed forward. Edmund was not at the hazard table anymore. She scanned the room frantically, her throat tight, until she spotted him in the far corner, seated across from Lord Whitmore. Her blood turned to ice water. Lord Whitmore was perhaps 50, with a face like a Renaissance portrait of a poisoner, thin, elegant, cold. He was known throughout society as a man who collected debts with the patience of a spider and the mercy of a winter storm. Young men who could not pay found themselves ruined, their families dragged through scandal, their futures destroyed. Lord Whitmore did not need the money. He simply enjoyed the power. And Edmund, foolish, reckless, desperate to prove himself Edmund, was playing cards with him. Georgiana forced herself to walk rather than run, to approach with composure rather than panic. By the time she reached the table, she had assembled her features into mild sisterly concern, nothing more. "Edmund, dear." She laid a hand on his shoulder and felt the tension vibrating through him. "Mother was asking for you." "Not now, Georgie." He did not look at her. His eyes were fixed on his cards, and his knuckles were white where he gripped them. "I'm in the middle of a hand. A rather important hand, I should say." Lord Whitmore's voice was silk over steel. He set down his cards with delicate precision, revealing a spread that made Edmund's face go grey. "I believe that is another £500 to me, young Blackwell. That makes the evening's total. Let me see. £2,400. £2,400. The number rang in Georgiana's ears like a death knell. They did not have 2,400 pence to spare. "I'll win it back," Edmund's voice cracked. "One more hand. Double or nothing." "Edmund, no." Georgiana's grip tightened on his shoulder. "We should go. Your sister speaks sense." Lord Whitmore smiled, and it was the smile of a cat watching a mouse run in circles. "Though I confess I am curious how you intend to honour your debt, young man. Your father's credit is exhausted, shall we say. And your own prospects appear similarly limited." Edmund shoved back from the table, his chair scraping loudly enough to draw attention from nearby players. "I'll pay. I'll find a way. I just need time." "Time." Lord Whitmore savoured the word. "How much time? A week? A month? A year?" He rose, adjusting his cuffs with theatrical precision. "I think not. I think perhaps we shall discuss terms now, while the debt is fresh in your mind." "He's barely 20 years old." Georgiana stepped forward, placing herself between her brother and Lord Whitmore. "Surely you cannot mean to hold him to a debt incurred when he was clearly—" "Clearly what, Lady Georgiana? Drunk? Foolish? Young?" Whitmore's smile widened. "These are not defences. These are choices. Your brother chose to sit at my table. He chose to continue playing past his means. He chose to wager money he does not have." His pale eyes swept over her, assessing. "Unless, of course, someone else wishes to assume responsibility for his debts." The implication hung in the air, foul as smoke. Georgiana felt her skin crawl, but she held her ground. "What terms would satisfy you, my lord?" "Georgie, don't—" Edmund grabbed her arm, but she shook him off. "What terms?" she repeated. Lord Whitmore studied her for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "We shall discuss it. Later, when you have had time to consider your options." He executed a bow that was technically perfect and spiritually obscene. "I shall call upon Thornwood House tomorrow afternoon. Do ensure you are available to receive me." He left them standing in the card-room, surrounded by whispers and avid stares, and Georgiana felt the walls of her carefully constructed life begin to crumble around her. "Georgie, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Edmund's voice broke. He looked young suddenly, young and terrified, the bravado stripped away to reveal the boy beneath. "Not here." She took his arm with a grip that would leave bruises. "Smile. Walk. We are going to leave this room as though nothing has happened." They walked. She had trained him well enough for that, at least trained him through 100 small disasters, 100 moments when the Blackwell family's disgrace threatened to become public spectacle. He straightened his spine and fixed his features into something approximating aristocratic boredom, and together they navigated through the card-room, through the hall, toward the relative privacy of the back corridor. Only when they were alone, hidden in a dim passage that smelled of old flowers and candle wax, did Georgiana release him. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. £2,400. She could barely force the words past her lips. Edmund, how could you? How could you be so... I thought I could win it back. I was winning earlier. I was ahead by nearly £100, and then you kept playing. Like father. Exactly like father. The words came out harsh, harsher than she intended, and she watched her brother flinch as though she had struck him. I'm not like father. No? Then why are we standing here having this conversation? Why am I trying to find a way to save you from a man who will destroy our family for sport? Her voice rose, cracked, and she pressed her hands over her mouth to contain the sound that wanted to escape something between a laugh and a scream. Edmund said nothing. There was nothing to say. Georgiana closed her eyes and tried to think. They had no money. Their father would be useless drunk by now, probably, lost in some gaming hell of his own. Their mother lived in a laudanum haze that made the present bearable by making it invisible. There was no one to help them. There was never anyone to help them. Except... Her eyes snapped open. Lord Whitmore. He's afraid of someone. There must be someone. Someone with enough power, enough influence, to make him reconsider. Whitmore isn't afraid of anyone. Everyone is afraid of someone. Her mind raced through the guests she had catalogued over the evening, the complex web of social power and obligation that governed their world. The Duke of Ashworth. They had some sort of dispute last season. I read about it in the papers. Whitmore tried to destroy the nephew of someone Ashworth protects, and Ashworth did something. No one knows exactly what, but Whitmore backed down, completely, publicly. The Ghost Duke? Edmund laughed bitterly. He won't help us. He doesn't help anyone. He barely speaks to anyone. And we don't have any connection to him. We've never even been introduced. Then I shall introduce myself. Georgie. But she was already moving, already calculating. She had seen Ashworth earlier in the evening, a tall figure in severe black, standing apart from the crowd, with the particular stillness of a man who wanted to be elsewhere. He had stayed for perhaps 20 minutes before vanishing, but she had heard someone mention seeing him in the conservatory, apparently preferring plants to people. The conservatory. Yes, she could work with that. Go home, she told Edmund. Take a hack, go straight home, do not stop anywhere, do not speak to anyone. I will handle this. What are you going to do? Whatever I have to. She left him there in the dim corridor, his face a pale oval in the darkness, and walked back into the light and heat and noise of the ball. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth, but her steps were steady, her expression serene. No one looking at her would see anything amiss. No one ever did. The conservatory was a glass-walled addition at the back of the house, accessible through a set of French doors that most guests ignored in favour of the terrace. Lady Kellingham had filled it with exotic plants, palms and ferns, and flowering things whose names Georgiana did not know, creating a jungle of shadows and green darkness at the heart of her glittering party. Georgiana slipped through the doors and stood still, letting her eyes adjust to the dimness. Moonlight filtered through the glass ceiling, turning everything silver and strange. The air was thick with moisture and the heavy scent of tropical blooms. Somewhere, water dripped into a basin with a rhythm like a heartbeat. And there, at the far end of the conservatory, stood the Duke of Ashworth. He was looking up at something, a vine climbing the ironwork frame, perhaps, or the moon beyond the glass, and he had not heard her enter. She had a moment to study him unobserved, the severe lines of his profile, the dark hair that fell across his forehead, the way he stood with his hands clasped behind his back, like a man braced for bad news. He was not handsome in the fashionable sense. His features were too strong, his expression too forbidding. But there was something about him that made it difficult to look away, a quality of stillness that suggested depths unknown, storms held in check. Georgiana took a breath and stepped forward. A twig cracked beneath her slipper. The Duke turned. His eyes found her in the darkness, grey, she remembered, grey like storm clouds, and his expression shifted from irritation to something more guarded. "Lady Georgiana Blackwell." His voice was low, rough, surprising. "We have not been introduced." "No, Your Grace." "Which is why I am introducing myself." She dropped a curtsy, precise and shallow, the curtsy of an earl's daughter to a duke, acknowledging rank without grovelling. "Forgive my intrusion. I require your assistance." Something flickered in those grey eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or interest. "You require my assistance?" "Yes. We have never spoken. We have no mutual acquaintance. We have, in fact, no connection whatsoever." He took a step toward her, and she resisted the urge to step back. "And yet, you have followed me into a dark conservatory to ask for my help." "Yes." "Why?" "Because you are the only person in this house who might be willing and able to give it." A long pause. The Duke studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle, as though he were trying to read the secrets written on her bones. "Most people," he said slowly, "are afraid of me." "I don't have the luxury of being afraid of you, Your Grace. I am too busy being terrified of Lord Whitmore." His expression sharpened. "Whitmore?" "My brother lost money to him tonight. A great deal of money. Money we do not have." The words came faster now, tumbling out despite her best efforts at composure. "I know what he does to people who cannot pay. I know what he intends to do to Edmund. And I know everyone knows that last season you stopped him from destroying Henry Carmichael. I don't know how. I don't care how. I only know that you did it, and I am asking you, begging you to do it again. For your brother. For my family." The Duke was silent for a long moment. Georgiana held her breath, counting heartbeats, watching the play of moonlight across his features. "And what?" he said finally. "Do you intend to offer me in return?" The question hung in the air between them. Georgiana thought of all the ways she had prepared for this conversation, all the arguments and appeals and carefully crafted persuasions. She thought of her mother's pearls warm against her throat, the only things left to sell. She thought of Edmund's face in the darkness, young and terrified. "Whatever you want." The words came out steadier than she felt. "I know I have nothing of value to offer. No money, no influence, no connections that could benefit you. But I am," she faltered, searching for the right word. "I am useful. I can be useful. Whatever you need, a hostess, a secretary, a—" She stopped, her face flaming. "A mistress?" His voice was flat, unreadable. "If that is your price." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "I will do whatever is necessary to protect my family. If that means debasing myself with a man I barely know, then yes, I will pay that price. Though I confess I would find it preferable if your demands were of a less personal nature." Something shifted in the Duke's expression. He turned away from her, moving toward a wrought iron bench half hidden by ferns, and stood there for a moment with his back to her. "You came here prepared to sell yourself," he said, "to a stranger, for your brother's gambling debts. I came here prepared to do whatever is necessary. And if I told you that my price was your complete degradation, your ruin, your destruction—" Georgiana's hands curled into fists at her sides. "Then I would ask you to be specific about your terms, Your Grace, so that I might determine whether the cost was bearable." He made a sound that might have been a laugh, harsh, brief, startled out of him. When he turned back to face her, there was something almost like respect in his eyes. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Lady Georgiana. I am neither. I am simply out of options." The Duke moved toward her, and this time she did not try to hold her ground. She took one step back, then another, until her shoulders pressed against a column wreathed in climbing roses. He stopped close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the faint scent of sandalwood and smoke, see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. "I do not want your body," he said. "I do not want your degradation. I am not, whatever society may believe, a monster." "Then what do you want?" "A service." "A performance." His lips curved in something that was not quite a smile. "I want you to pretend to be my betrothed." Of all the things she had expected him to say, this was not among them. Georgiana stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You're betrothed. For 1 season, from now until the end of June. You will appear at my side at social functions. You will act the part of a woman besotted with her future husband. You will convince society that the ghost duke has finally chosen a bride." His grey eyes held hers, unblinking. "In exchange, I will deal with Whitmore. Your brother's debt will disappear. Your family will be protected." "Why?" The question came out before she could stop it. "Why would you need a false engagement? You could have any woman in London. I could have any woman in London's dowry, you mean? Her connections, her breeding potential." His voice was bitter as winter wind. "I have spent 10 years fending off mothers and their marriageable daughters. 10 years of being hunted like a fox, manipulated, manoeuvred, trapped in corners by ambitious chits who have been told that the Duke of Ashworth requires a wife. I am tired of it. I want 1 season, 1 single season of peace. And you, Lady Georgiana, can give me that. By pretending to be your betrothed. By being engaged to me so thoroughly, so convincingly, that no one will dare approach me with their schemes and stratagems. By the end of June, we will stage a quiet dissolution of the engagement you will jilt me, citing irreconcilable differences of temperament, and we will both be free. I will have had my season of peace, and you will have your brother's debt erased and your reputation intact." Georgiana's mind raced through the implications. A false engagement. 3 months of pretending to love a man she did not know. 3 months of lying to everyone she knew, to society at large, to her own family. "My family will expect a wedding." "Your family will expect whatever you tell them to expect. You strike me as a woman capable of managing expectations." She could not argue with that. Managing expectations was all she had done for 6 years. And at the end, when we dissolve the engagement, my reputation will be sympathetic. The woman who almost tamed the ghost duke, brought low by his cold and unfeeling nature. You will be a romantic figure, not a ruined one. His eyes glittered in the moonlight. "I am offering you a way out, Lady Georgiana. I am offering you protection for your family and freedom from Whitmore. All I ask in return is 3 months of your time and your theatrical skills." It was mad. It was absolutely mad. "And yet, you could simply help me without asking for anything in return," she pointed out. "If you wanted to be kind." "I am not kind. I am practical. And I see an opportunity that benefits us both." He held out his hand, not to shake, not to kiss, but palm up, an offering. "Do we have an agreement?" Georgiana looked at his hand. Long fingers, strong and elegant. The hand of a man who could crush her or save her, depending on his whims. She thought of Edmund's terrified face. She thought of Lord Whitmore's poisonous smile. She thought of all the years she had spent being useful, being adaptable, being whatever other people needed her to be. What was 3 more months of performance? "We have an agreement," she said, and placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and firm. For a moment they stood there in the moonlit darkness, bound by a bargain neither of them fully understood, and Georgiana felt something shift in the air between them, something electric, something dangerous. Then she saw it. a flicker of movement at the edge of her vision, a shadow in the doorway behind them. "Someone's watching." The words came out in a desperate whisper. "Kiss me. Someone's watching." She did not think. She did not plan. She simply spoke, and the Duke did not hesitate. He pulled her toward him with one swift motion, his hand releasing hers to cup the back of her neck, tilting her face up to his. And then his mouth was on hers. And Georgiana forgot about the watcher in the doorway, forgot about Whitmore, forgot about Edmund, forgot about everything except the shocking heat of his lips and the strength of his arm around her waist. He kissed her, like he was trying to learn something, like she was a text in a language he did not quite speak, and he was determined to master every word. His mouth moved over hers with a precision that should have felt cold, and instead felt devastating, controlled passion, banked fire, something vast, held carefully in check. Georgiana's hands came up to grip his lapels without her permission. Her lips parted under his, and she heard herself make a sound, a soft, shocked exhale that seemed to echo in the humid air. He tasted like brandy and something darker, something that made her knees weak and her heart race, and when his teeth grazed her lower lip, she felt the sensation all the way to her toes. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The Duke released her and stepped back. His breathing was uneven, a small satisfaction, but his expression had already smoothed into its customary mask. "Well," he said, "that should convince any watcher of our sincerity." Georgiana turned to look at the doorway. Moonlight spilled through the glass, illuminating the entrance clearly. There was no one there. "I saw someone." Her voice came out strange, breathless. "I was certain I saw—" "There is no one." The Duke's voice was flat. Perhaps a servant passing in the hallway. Perhaps a shadow. Perhaps nothing at all. She stared at the empty doorway, heat flooding her cheeks. She had asked him to kiss her, demanded it, and there had been no one watching. No witness to provide cover for her forwardness. She had simply wanted him to kiss her, and her mind had provided the excuse. Oh God. "I apologize." She could not look at him. "I was certain I thought I saw—" "Do not apologize." His voice was strange now, rough in a way it had not been before. "If we are to be convincingly engaged, we shall have to accustom ourselves to such displays. Consider it a rehearsal." A rehearsal. Yes, that was all it had been. A rehearsal for the performance they were about to undertake. Georgiana pressed her fingers to her lips, which still tingled with the memory of his kiss, and tried to convince herself that the pounding of her heart was merely surprise. "We should return to the ball," she said, separately, of course, to avoid suspicion. "No." The Duke's hand caught her elbow, stopping her before she could flee. "We should return together. We should announce our engagement tonight." "Tonight?" She stared at him. "But we have only just agreed. We have no story, no explanation. The best performances are unrehearsed." Something glittered in his grey eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or challenge. "Come, Lady Georgiana, let us give society something to talk about." He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation she took it. Her fingers trembled slightly against the fine wool of his coat. "What will we tell them when they ask how this happened?" "The truth, more or less. We have been conducting a secret courtship. I have admired you from afar for months. Tonight I could no longer contain my feelings and declared myself in the conservatory." His mouth curved. "The kiss was merely the seal on our agreement." "No one will believe that. You don't admire anyone. You barely speak to anyone. Which is why they will believe it absolutely. The ghost Duke, brought low at last by love. It is exactly the sort of dramatic nonsense society craves." They emerged from the conservatory into the bright heat of the ballroom, and Georgiana felt the weight of 100 stares pressing down upon her. Whispers started immediately, spreading through the crowd like fire through dry grass. The Duke of Ashworth, arm in arm with the impoverished Blackwell girl. What could it mean? Surely not impossible. The Duke led her to the centre of the room, where Lady Kellingham stood surrounded by her most favoured guests. The Marchioness's eyes went wide as they approached, her mouth forming a perfect O of astonishment. "Lady Kellingham." The Duke's voice carried effortlessly, silencing conversations throughout the room. "Allow me to present my betrothed, Lady Georgiana Blackwell. We are to be married at the end of the season." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Lady Kellingham let out a shriek of delight, and the room exploded into chaos. Georgiana stood in the eye of the hurricane, the Duke's hand steady on her arm, and smiled until her face ached. People pressed close, offering congratulations, demanding details, exclaiming over the shock of it all. She answered questions she barely heard, accepted embraces from women who had snubbed her for years, watched the tides of social fortune reverse themselves in the span of a single announcement. And through it all, she was aware of the Duke beside her, his solid presence, his cool composure, the way his thumb traced small circles on the inside of her wrist where no one could see. She did not look at Lord Whitmore across the room, his face gone grey with fury. She did not think about what she had agreed to, or what it would cost her. She only thought about the kiss in the conservatory, the kiss that had been meant for an audience that did not exist, and wondered why she could still feel the ghost of it burning on her lips. Later, much later, Georgiana sat at the vanity in her small bedchamber, staring at her reflection in the spotted mirror. The candle flame wavered, casting shadows across her face, and she looked older than her 24 years. Tired, fragile, real. She had removed her mother's pearls and set them on the vanity, where they gleamed softly in the light. Her dress hung over the back of a chair, already looking shabby now that the evening's enchantment had worn off. Tomorrow she would have to let the seams out again. She had gained weight this winter, not that anyone had noticed. Edmund had been asleep when she returned, or pretending to be. She had not knocked on his door. What was there to say? I have solved the problem. I have sold 3 months of my life to a stranger. I have kissed a man I do not know and cannot stop thinking about. She pressed her fingers to her lips, as she had done in the conservatory. They did not tingle anymore, but the memory remained vivid, visceral, impossible to dismiss. It had meant nothing. It was part of the bargain. A rehearsal, he had called it. A necessary fiction. Except there had been no one watching. She had imagined the figure in the doorway, conjured it from shadows and moonlight and desperate need. She had asked the Duke to kiss her, and he had obliged, and there had been no witness to justify the request, which meant that some part of her, some buried, reckless, hungry part, had simply wanted to be kissed, had wanted to know what it felt like to be held by a man who looked at her as though she were worth looking at, had wanted, for one impossible moment, to feel something other than exhaustion and fear and the grinding weight of duty. Georgiana closed her eyes. This was dangerous. She could not afford to feel anything real for the Duke of Ashworth. Their engagement was a performance, a business arrangement, a temporary fiction designed to benefit them both. In 3 months it would be over, and she would return to her ordinary life, older, wiser, and hopefully no longer in debt to Lord Whitmore. She could not fall in love with him. She would not fall in love with him. It was simply a matter of maintaining control, of keeping her emotions carefully contained, as she had done for years, of being useful rather than wanting, practical rather than passionate, sensible rather than swept away. The kiss had meant nothing. It would mean nothing. She would not allow it to mean anything. Georgiana blew out the candle and sat in the darkness for a long moment, her hand pressed to her lips, her heart beating steadily against her ribs. In 3 months, it would be over. She only had to survive 3 months. The morning after the Kellingham ball, Georgiana woke to chaos. Her mother, roused from her usual laudanum haze by the magnitude of the news, had descended upon her bedchamber at an hour that could only be described as indecent. Lady Thornwood was a faded woman, beautiful once, now worn thin by disappointment and the slow erosion of hope. But today her eyes were bright, her movements animated, her voice carrying a tremor of something almost like joy. "The Duke of Ashworth," she kept saying, as though repetition might make it real. "My daughter, engaged to the Duke of Ashworth. I cannot credit it. I simply cannot credit it." Georgiana submitted to being embraced, exclaimed over, and subjected to a barrage of questions she could not honestly answer. How long had they been courting? When had he declared himself? What had he said? What had she said? Was she in love? Was he? When would the wedding take place? She fabricated answers as best she could, drawing on the thin outline she and the Duke had established in those frantic moments before their public announcement. A secret courtship, stolen glances at balls, a correspondence conducted through a trusted intermediary, the Duke's unexpected declaration in the conservatory, her breathless acceptance. It was all lies, of course, beautiful, necessary lies. "I knew," her mother said, clasping Georgiana's hands with unusual fervour. "I always knew you would save us, my darling. You are so clever, so capable. I told your father, did I not? Georgiana will find a way. Georgiana always finds a way." The words landed like blows, but Georgiana kept her smile fixed in place. This was her role, after all, the capable one, the one who found ways, the one who sacrificed and strategized and survived so that others did not have to. She wondered, briefly, what it would feel like to be loved for something other than usefulness. The thought was dangerous. She pushed it away. By noon, the first callers had begun to arrive, a steady stream of society matrons and curious acquaintances, all eager to inspect the woman who had somehow captured the ghost Duke. Georgiana received them in the cramped drawing-room, serving weak tea and stale biscuits, while pretending not to notice the pitying glances at the worn upholstery and the water stain on the ceiling. Lady Harrington came with her daughter, both of them wearing expressions of barely concealed incredulity. Mrs. Pemberton came alone, her eyes sharp with the desire to uncover scandal. Lady Ashford came with genuine warmth, having always been kind to Georgiana in a distant maternal way. And then, at 2:30, the Duke himself arrived. The drawing-room fell silent as he was announced. Georgiana rose from her chair, acutely aware of her plain morning dress and her hastily pinned hair, and watched him enter, tall, severe, impossibly elegant in his dark coat and gleaming boots. He looked like a creature from another world, a world of wealth and power and perfect tailoring, temporarily slumming in the cramped shabbiness of Thornwood House. "Ladies," he inclined his head to the assembled company, his grey eyes sweeping the room before settling on Georgiana. "My betrothed, I hope I am not interrupting." "Not at all, Your Grace." Georgiana moved toward him, and he caught her hand, raising it to his lips. The kiss was brief and proper, barely a brush of warmth against her knuckles, but she felt it resonate through her entire body. "We were just discussing the wedding." "Were you?" Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, perhaps. "Then I am pleased to have arrived in time to offer my input. I find that weddings planned without the groom's involvement tend to feature an alarming number of orange blossoms and weeping relatives." A startled laugh escaped Lady Ashford. Mrs. Pemberton looked scandalized. Lady Harrington and her daughter exchanged glances that suggested they were rapidly reassessing their understanding of the situation. "Perhaps," the Duke continued smoothly, "my betrothed would consent to a turn about the garden. I find myself in need of fresh air, and I confess a desire to speak with Lady Georgiana privately." It was not really a request. Georgiana recognized the command beneath the courteous phrasing and nodded, allowing him to draw her toward the door. She could feel the weight of a dozen curious stares pressing against her back as they left. The garden behind Thornwood House was a sad affair, overgrown hedges, neglected flower beds, a stone bench cracked down the middle, but the Duke surveyed it as though it were Versailles, his expression betraying nothing. "Your callers seem numerous," he observed. "They are vultures, come to pick over the carcass of my privacy." Georgiana pulled her hand from his arm and moved toward the bench, needing distance. "But I suppose I should be grateful. Yesterday they would not have deigned to notice me. Today I am the most fascinating woman in London. That is rather the point." He followed her but did not sit, choosing instead to stand with his back to an overgrown rosebush. "Our engagement must appear genuine. Public interest, while tiresome, serves to cement the fiction. I understand the strategy, Your Grace. I am merely observing that it is exhausting." "Sebastian." She blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "My name is Sebastian. If we are to be convincingly betrothed, you cannot continue to address me as Your Grace in every conversation. It would raise suspicions." "Sebastian," she repeated, testing the name. It felt strange on her tongue, too intimate, too real. "And you may call me Georgiana, or Georgie, if you prefer. That is what my family calls me." "Georgiana." He said it slowly, as though tasting each syllable. "It suits you. Classical, measured, concealing hidden depths." She did not know how to respond to that, so she said nothing. They stood in silence for a moment, the spring breeze carrying the scent of early roses and distant rain. Somewhere in the house, a door slammed. A dog barked in a neighboring garden. The ordinary sounds of ordinary life, continuing as though everything had not changed. "I spoke with Lord Whitmore this morning," Sebastian said abruptly. Georgiana's breath caught. "And?" "And your brother's debt has been settled. Whitmore will not trouble your family again." The relief that flooded through her was so intense it made her dizzy. She gripped the edge of the cracked bench, steadying herself, and tried to find words adequate to the moment. "How?" she managed. How did you convince him?" "I reminded him that he has secrets he would prefer to keep hidden." Sebastian's voice was flat, unreadable. "Whitmore enjoys destroying others, but he is not immune to destruction himself. I merely suggested that his attention might be better directed elsewhere." "You threatened him." "I informed him of the consequences of his actions. The interpretation is his own." Georgiana stared at him, this man she had kissed in a moonlit conservatory, this stranger who had just saved her family from ruin with what sounded like nothing more than a quiet conversation. He stood in her shabby garden in his immaculate clothes, looking for all the world like a figure carved from marble, and she could not read a single thing in his expression. "Thank you," she said. The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. Something shifted in his grey eyes. "You need not thank me. It is part of our arrangement. Nevertheless, you have done my family a great service. I will not forget it." He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with that unsettling intensity. Then, abruptly, he looked away. "There is a house party," he said, "at my country estate in Surrey. It begins in 3 days and continues for a fortnight. My aunt is hosting it, ostensibly to celebrate our engagement. In truth, she is hoping to change my mind." "Your aunt disapproves of me?" My aunt disapproves of everything that does not originate from her own machinations. She has had a candidate in mind for my Duchess for years, Lady Arabella Vance, daughter of the Earl of Pemberton. Beautiful, wealthy, impeccably connected. His mouth twisted. Everything I am expected to want. And you do not want her? I do not want anyone. That is rather the point. He turned back to face her, and his expression had hardened into something that looked almost like anger. But my aunt is persistent, and she will use this house party to parade Lady Arabella before me at every opportunity. I need you there, Georgiana. I need you to be so convincingly my betrothed that even my aunt cannot continue her schemes. Then I will come. She said it simply, without hesitation. She had made a bargain, and she would honor it. That was what she did. But something in his expression flickered surprise, perhaps, or something softer. You do not ask about the terms, the accommodations, the other guests. Would any of those things change my answer? No, I suppose they would not. He was quiet for a moment, and then, unexpectedly, he smiled. It transformed his face, softening the harsh lines, revealing something almost boyish beneath the severity. You are a remarkable woman, Georgiana Blackwell. The compliment caught her off guard. She felt heat rise to her cheeks and looked away, flustered by the intensity of her own reaction. I am a practical woman, she said. Remarkability is a luxury I cannot afford. And yet you have it nonetheless. He moved toward her, close enough that she could smell the sandalwood scent of him, feel the warmth radiating from his body. We leave for Surrey in 3 days. My carriage will collect you and your family at 9 o'clock. Bring whatever you require for a fortnight. I will cover the expenses. I could not possibly. You can and you will. Our arrangement requires that you appear as a suitable duchess, not a poor relation scraping by on charity. His voice brooked no argument. There is a modiste on Bond Street who owes me a favor. She will call on you tomorrow to outfit you appropriately. Georgiana opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. He was right, of course. Her shabby wardrobe would only fuel the whispers that their engagement was somehow false or mercenary. If she was to play the part of a future duchess, she needed to look like one. Very well, she said. I will accept your assistance, but I want it noted that I do so under protest. Noted. That ghost of a smile again, flickering at the corners of his mouth. I believe we understand each other, Georgiana. He took her hand again, and this time when he raised it to his lips, the kiss lingered a breath longer than propriety allowed, warm against her skin. She felt her heart stutter in her chest, felt the now familiar electricity arc between them. Until Surrey, he said, and released her. She watched him go through the garden gate, into the waiting carriage, out of sight, and tried to remember that this was all a performance, a fiction, a temporary arrangement that would end in 3 months, leaving them both free to return to their separate lives. She tried to remember that she could not afford to feel anything real. She was not entirely successful. The journey to Surrey took the better part of a day. The Duke's carriage was a marvel of modern engineering, well sprung, sumptuously appointed, with velvet cushions and fur rugs, and a small compartment stocked with wine and pastries. Georgiana sat across from her mother and Edmund, watching the London streets give way to countryside, and tried to ignore the fluttering in her stomach that had nothing to do with the motion of the carriage. Her new wardrobe filled 3 trunks, strapped to the back of the vehicle. The modiste, a terrifying French woman named Madame Delacroix, had descended upon Thornwood House like a conquering army, taking measurements and issuing pronouncements, and producing an astonishing array of gowns, pelisses, spencers, and unmentionables in the space of 48 hours. Georgiana had tried on more clothes in 2 days than she had owned in her entire life. She was wearing one of them now, a travelling costume in deep blue wool, with brass buttons and a matching bonnet that framed her face becomingly. She barely recognized herself in it. She looked like a woman who belonged in a duke's carriage, travelling to a duke's estate, preparing to marry a duke. The thought made her slightly nauseated. Her mother had fallen asleep shortly after they left the city, her head lolling against the velvet squabs. Edmund sat beside her, staring out the window with an expression that mixed guilt and gratitude in equal measure. He had not spoken much since the night of the Kellingham ball had barely met her eyes, in fact. Georgiana supposed he was still processing the magnitude of what she had done for him. Or perhaps he simply did not know how to thank her without acknowledging the depths of his own failure. Either way, she did not press him. There would be time enough for difficult conversations later. The Duke's estate. Ashworth Park came into view as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon. Georgiana caught her first glimpse of it through the carriage window and felt her breath catch in her throat. It was enormous, a vast Palladian structure in honey-coloured stone, with wings stretching out on either side like embracing arms, formal gardens descending in terraces toward a glittering lake. The grounds seemed to go on forever, parkland dotted with ancient oaks, a distant folly perched on a hill, deer grazing peacefully in the golden light. "Good Lord," Edmund breathed. "It's the size of a small country." "It is one of the great houses of England," Georgiana said quietly. "I read about it once. The gardens were designed by Capability Brown. The library contains over 15,000 volumes. The wine cellar is legendary. And you are going to be mistress of all this." Edmund's voice was strange, awed, perhaps, or guilty, or some combination of both. "Georgie, are you certain about this?" She turned to look at him, this brother she had spent her life protecting. He was pale beneath his fashionable tan, his eyes shadowed with something that looked like worry. "I am certain," she said, and wished she meant it. The carriage rolled up the sweeping drive and came to a halt before the great front doors. Footmen in livery materialized to assist with luggage. A butler of imposing dignity stood ready to welcome them. And there, at the top of the stone steps, stood Sebastian. He was dressed for the country simpler clothes than he had worn in London, though still impeccably tailored. His dark hair was slightly wind-blown, as though he had been walking the grounds, and there was a faint flush of colour in his usually pale cheeks. He looked younger somehow. More human, more dangerous. He descended the steps as Georgiana emerged from the carriage, and when he took her hand, the touch sent electricity through her entire body. "Welcome to Ashworth Park," he said. "I hope the journey was not too arduous." "It was perfectly comfortable. Your carriage is magnificent." "A small extravagance." His eyes travelled over her new travelling costume, and something flickered in their grey depths. Appreciation, perhaps, or satisfaction. "You look well, Georgiana. The blue suits you." Heat rose to her cheeks. "Madame Delacroix is very talented." "She is, but the fabric is merely canvas. The masterpiece is the woman wearing it." She did not know how to respond to that. Before she could formulate an answer, another figure appeared at the top of the steps, a woman of perhaps 60, tall and thin, dressed in unrelenting black, with the kind of aristocratic face that suggested generations of careful breeding and absolute confidence in one's own superiority. "Aunt Cordelia," Sebastian's voice cooled noticeably. "May I present my betrothed, Lady Georgiana Blackwell?" The Dowager Duchess of Ashworth surveyed Georgiana with eyes that missed nothing. Her gaze travelled from the new bonnet to the brass buttons to the hem of the blue skirt, cataloguing every detail, assessing every weakness. "Lady Georgiana." Her voice was cut crystal beautiful and sharp enough to draw blood. "How unexpected. Sebastian has told us so little about you." "There has been little time, Your Grace." Georgiana curtsied precisely, neither too deep nor too shallow. "Our courtship was rather whirlwind. So I understand. The dowager's thin lips curved in something that was not quite a smile. "Well, I suppose we shall have ample opportunity to become acquainted over the coming fortnight. Sebastian, Lady Arabella and her family arrived this morning. She is most eager to offer her congratulations." Something flickered across Sebastian's face. Irritation, quickly suppressed. "How kind of her," he said flatly. "I look forward to receiving them. But first, I should like to show my betrothed to her rooms. The journey has been long, and I am certain she wishes to rest before dinner." The dowager inclined her head, conceding the point with poor grace, and Sebastian drew Georgiana up the steps and into the house. The interior of Ashworth Park was as magnificent as its exterior. A great hall with a soaring ceiling painted with classical scenes, marble floors and gilded mirrors, portraits of ancestors stretching back generations, all of them wearing expressions of aristocratic disdain. Georgiana felt very small and very temporary, a pretender walking through a history that did not belong to her. "My aunt is difficult," Sebastian said in a low voice as they climbed the grand staircase. "I apologize in advance for anything she may say or do during your stay. She is protective of her family. I understand. She is protective of her vision for her family. There is a difference." He guided her down a long corridor, past doors that led to rooms she could only imagine, toward a suite at the very end. "She has spent 10 years trying to marry me to Lady Arabella Vance. The announcement of our engagement came as a considerable shock." "And Lady Arabella? Was she shocked as well?" Sebastian's jaw tightened. "Lady Arabella has been led to expect my proposal since she was 16 years old. I imagine she was more than shocked. I imagine she was furious." Georgiana thought about that, about a young woman raised to believe she was destined for a particular future, suddenly finding that future snatched away by a stranger. She felt an unexpected stab of sympathy. "Perhaps I should make an effort to befriend her," she said, "to ease the awkwardness." "You would befriend a woman who wishes to take your place?" "I would befriend a woman who has been hurt by circumstances beyond her control." She met his eyes steadily. "Whatever Lady Arabella's expectations, she is not the author of this situation. Neither she nor I asked to be placed in opposition to each other." Sebastian was silent for a long moment, studying her with that unsettling intensity. "You are far too kind for this world, Georgiana Blackwell," he said finally. "It will destroy you if you let it. Then I shall have to ensure I do not let it." He smiled at that, a real smile, warm and unexpected, transforming his severe features into something almost beautiful. "Your rooms," he said, and opened the door. The suite was exquisite. A sitting room with tall windows overlooking the gardens, a bedroom with a canopied bed draped in silk, a dressing room, a private bath, fresh flowers on every surface. It was more luxurious than anything Georgiana had ever experienced, more beautiful than anything she had ever dreamed. "I hope it will be adequate," Sebastian said, watching her reaction with something like anxiety. "Adequate." She laughed, a little breathlessly. "It is the most beautiful room I have ever seen." Relief flickered across his face. "I am glad. I wanted you to be comfortable. I wanted you to feel—" He trailed off, seemingly unable to complete the thought. "Feel what?" "At home," he said quietly. "I wanted you to feel at home." Their eyes met, and for a moment the pretense fell away entirely. They were not a duke and his convenient fiancée. They were just two people, standing in a beautiful room, feeling something neither of them had expected to feel. Then Sebastian cleared his throat and stepped back, the mask sliding back into place. "Dinner is at 8. My aunt keeps formal hours. I will come to escort you down at 1:45. "Thank you." He nodded and turned to leave. But at the door he paused. "Georgiana." "Yes?" "I am glad you are here." He said it simply, without embellishment, and then he was gone. Georgiana stood in the center of her beautiful room, surrounded by silk and flowers and the fading afternoon light, and pressed her hand to her chest, where her heart was beating far too fast. The first week at Ashworth Park passed in a blur of social obligations and emotional landmines. Lady Arabella Vance was everything Georgiana was not. Tall, willowy, blonde, possessed of the kind of ethereal beauty that painters immortalized and poets celebrated. She moved through the house party with effortless grace, her laugh like silver bells, her conversation sparkling and light. Every man in attendance gravitated toward her. Every woman watched her with a mixture of envy and despair. She was also, Georgiana came to realize, genuinely kind. It would have been easier if she had been cruel, if she had cut Georgiana with sharp words, or excluded her from conversations, or made her feel unwelcome. Instead, Lady Arabella went out of her way to be gracious, to include Georgiana in activities, to compliment her new wardrobe and engage her in friendly conversation. "You must think me terribly pathetic," Arabella said one afternoon as they walked together through the rose garden, "trailing after a man who has chosen someone else. But I confess I simply do not know how to do otherwise. I have been prepared for this future my entire life." "I think you are remarkably brave," Georgiana said honestly, "to face this situation with such grace. Many women would have withdrawn entirely." "Withdrawn to what?" Arabella's smile was sad. "Sebastian was my future. Without him, I am merely untethered, a balloon without a string. You are Lady Arabella Vance. You are beautiful and accomplished and kind. Any man would be fortunate to win your hand. Any man, except the one I wanted." Arabella laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Tell me, Lady Georgiana, how did you do it? How did you make him see you when he has spent 10 years seeing no one?" Georgiana thought about the moonlit conservatory, the desperate bargain, the kiss that had meant nothing and everything. "I wish I knew," she said. "I truly wish I knew." The Dowager Duchess was considerably less gracious than her chosen candidate. She watched Georgiana with cold eyes, cataloguing every mistake, every social misstep, every moment of uncertainty. At dinner, she asked pointed questions about Georgiana's family, her education, her accomplishments. In the drawing room, she made subtle references to the Blackwell family's financial difficulties, the Earl's gambling, the mother's fragile health. "You must understand," she said one evening when Sebastian had been called away to deal with estate business, "that the Dukedom of Ashworth carries certain responsibilities. The Duchess must be above reproach. She must represent the family with dignity and grace. She must bring something to the union beyond desperation." "I understand perfectly, Your Grace," Georgiana said, her voice even. "I also understand that the Duke has made his choice, and that choice is not subject to your approval." The Dowager's eyes narrowed. "We shall see." But despite the Dowager's hostility and Arabella's sad sweetness and the constant scrutiny of the other guests, something else was happening at Ashworth Park. Something Georgiana had not anticipated. She was falling in love. It happened in small moments, accumulating like snowflakes into something larger and more dangerous. Sebastian teaching her to ride properly in the vast parkland, patient and encouraging when she wobbled in the saddle. Sebastian reading poetry aloud in the library after dinner, his voice low and musical in the candle-lit darkness. Sebastian walking beside her in the gardens, pointing out plants his mother had loved, sharing memories he had never shared with anyone. "She used to bring me here when I was a boy," he said one afternoon, standing before a gnarled apple tree heavy with blossoms. This was her favorite spot in the entire estate. She said the apples reminded her of home. Where was home? Kent, a small manor house. Nothing grand. She was the daughter of a country squire, barely acceptable as a duchess. His jaw tightened. My father never let her forget it. He married her for her beauty and spent the rest of his life punishing her for not being more. That sounds lonely. It was devastating. She withered here, in this beautiful prison, surrounded by people who saw her as inadequate. He turned to face her, and his grey eyes were dark with old pain. She died when I was 15. Laudanum and despair. My father followed within the year, pickled in his own bitterness. Sebastian. She reached for him without thinking, her hand finding his. I swore I would never marry, he said. Never bind myself to someone in the chains that destroyed my parents. Never give anyone the power to wound me so deeply. His fingers tightened around hers. And yet, here I am, betrothed, bound, and I cannot seem to bring myself to regret it. Georgiana's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Our engagement is not real, she reminded herself. In 2 months, we will dissolve it, and you will be free. Yes. He was looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. That was the arrangement. That is still the arrangement. Is it? He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. Tell me, Georgiana, when you think about the end of our engagement, what do you feel? She should lie. She should maintain the fiction, protect herself, preserve the carefully constructed walls that had kept her safe for so many years. But she was tired of lying, tired of performing, tired of being useful rather than honest. I feel, she whispered, as though I am losing something I never truly had. Something shifted in his expression, something raw and unguarded, something that looked terrifyingly like hope. Georgiana! There you are! The dowager's voice cut through the moment like a blade. She was striding toward them across the garden, her black skirts billowing behind her. Sebastian, Lord Pemberton wishes to speak with you about the hunting party tomorrow. And Lady Georgiana, I believe your mother is asking for you. Something about a headache. Sebastian's jaw tightened, but he released Georgiana's hand and stepped back, the mask sliding into place. Of course, Aunt Cordelia. I shall attend to Lord Pemberton immediately. He did not look at Georgiana as he walked away. She watched him go, her heart aching, and wondered if she had imagined the moment of connection between them. She was beginning to suspect she had imagined nothing. The turning point came on the 10th day of the house party. Georgiana had risen early, as was her habit, and slipped out of the house before anyone else was stirring. The morning was cool and clear, the gardens heavy with dew, and she walked without destination, simply enjoying the rare solitude. She found herself at the stables, drawn by the soft sounds of horses greeting the day. Inside, the air smelled of hay and leather and warm animals, and a single groom was moving between the stalls, filling water buckets. Lady Georgiana, he touched his cap. You're up early, my lady. I like the mornings, she said, before the world wakes up. His grace is the same. The groom nodded toward the far end of the stable. Out riding at dawn most days. Says it's the only time he can think clearly. Something sparked in her chest curiosity, longing, the desire to see Sebastian outside the rigid structure of the house party. Which horse does he usually ride? The black gelding, my lady. Thunder. But he's not taken him this morning. Said he was working in the library instead. The library? Of course. She thanked the groom and made her way back to the house, slipping in through a side door to avoid the servants beginning their daily work. The library was in the east wing, a vast room lined floor to ceiling with books, and when she pushed open the door, she found Sebastian exactly as the groom had described. Working. He sat at a large desk near the windows, papers spread before him, a cup of cold tea at his elbow. He had not yet dressed for the day. His shirt was open at the collar, his hair dishevelled, his jaw dark with stubble. He looked younger like this, more human, more vulnerable. He also looked utterly beautiful, and Georgiana's breath caught in her throat. Georgiana. He rose when he saw her, surprise flickering across his features. I did not expect anyone to be awake at this hour. I could not sleep. She moved into the room, drawn toward him despite her better judgment. The groom said you were working. I hope I am not intruding. Never. The word came out quickly, emphatically. He gestured to a chair near the desk. Please sit. I was merely reviewing estate accounts. Tedious but necessary. She sat, and for a moment they simply looked at each other in the early morning light. There was something different about the silence between them now, charged, expectant, full of unspoken possibilities. Sebastian, she began, about yesterday, what you said in the garden. I should not have spoken so freely. He cut her off, his expression shuddering. It was inappropriate. I apologize. No. She leaned forward, willing him to hear her. No, you should not apologize. What you said, it meant something to me. I want you to know that. He was very still, watching her with those storm-grey eyes. What did it mean? It meant that I am not the only one feeling confused by this arrangement, by the pretense, by the line between what is real and what is performance. And what is real, Georgiana? His voice was low, rough. What do you feel that is real? She should lie. She should protect herself. She should maintain the walls that had kept her safe for 24 years. But she was so tired of walls. I feel, she said slowly, as though I am becoming someone I do not recognize. Someone who thinks about you when you are not in the room. Someone who listens for your footsteps in the corridor. Someone who cannot look at you without wanting. She stopped, her face flaming. Without wanting what? Things I have no right to want. She forced herself to meet his eyes. We have an arrangement, a business transaction. I am not supposed to feel anything beyond gratitude and obligation. And yet you do. And yet I do. Sebastian rose from his chair and moved around the desk, stopping directly before her. He was so close she could see the individual threads of grey in his eyes, smell the sandalwood scent of him, feel the warmth radiating from his body. I have spent 10 years convincing myself that love is weakness, he said, that vulnerability is foolishness, that the only way to survive is to need nothing and no one. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek with devastating gentleness. And then you appeared in a moonlit conservatory, terrified and brave and utterly unexpected, and you asked me to kiss you because someone was watching. No one was watching, she whispered. No. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. No one was watching, but I kissed you anyway, and I have not stopped wanting to kiss you since. She should pull away. She should remind him of their arrangement, the boundaries they had established, the temporary nature of everything between them. Instead, she rose from her chair and closed the distance between them. Then kiss me now, she said, while no one is watching, while it is just us, while it can still mean something real. He made a sound low in his throat, half groan, half surrender, and then his mouth was on hers, and everything else fell away. This kiss was nothing like the first. That had been strategy, performance, a calculated move in a game they were both playing. This was something else entirely. This was hunger and hope, and the terrifying vulnerability of wanting something you might actually be allowed to have. His hands came up to frame her face, tilting her head to deepen the kiss. She gripped the lapels of his coat, pulling him closer, closer, until there was no space between them at all. He kissed her like she was precious and powerful, like she was something to be cherished rather than used. And she felt tears prick behind her closed eyelids at the devastating tenderness of it. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathless, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. "This was not supposed to happen," he murmured. "No. I was not supposed to fall in love with you." Her heart stopped, restarted, beat wildly against her ribs. "Say that again." "I love you." He pulled back to look at her, and his grey eyes were bright with something that looked like wonder. "I love your courage and your kindness and your sharp tongue. I love the way you manage impossible situations. I love the way you see through pretense to the truth beneath. I love you, Georgiana, and I do not want our engagement to end. Sebastian, marry me." His hands tightened on her face. "Not as a performance, not as an arrangement. Marry me because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Marry me because I want to wake up beside you every morning for the rest of my existence. Marry me because—" She kissed him, cutting off the torrent of words, pouring everything she felt into the press of her lips against his. When she pulled back, she was laughing, bright, breathless, incandescent with joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, really marry you, not for arrangement or convenience or strategy. Just because I love you, and I have loved you for longer than I wanted to admit, and I cannot imagine pretending to dissolve this engagement when I could spend the rest of my life making it real." Sebastian's smile was like sunrise, slow, brilliant, transformative. "Then we are agreed," he said. "We are agreed." He kissed her again, soft and sweet and full of promise. And Georgiana felt something shift in her chest, something old and heavy and afraid, finally loosening its grip. For the first time in her life, she was not performing. She was not being useful. She was simply being loved for exactly who she was. It felt like coming home. They found her in the drawing room an hour later. Georgiana had gone to change for breakfast, floating through the corridors in a haze of happiness, barely aware of the servants or the other guests or the beautiful rooms around her. Everything looked different now, brighter, full of possibility. She was fastening the buttons of her morning dress when she heard the dowager's voice, sharp and cold, carrying through the half-open door that connected to the adjoining sitting room. "She is unsuitable. Surely you can see that." "I see nothing of the sort." Sebastian's voice, equally cold. "Georgiana is everything I could want in a wife. She is the daughter of a bankrupt earl. Her family is a disgrace. Her mother is a laudanum addict, her brother a gambler, her father a wastrel. The connection would bring shame upon the Ashworth name. The Ashworth name has survived worse than a connection to the Blackwell family. You cannot be serious about this, Sebastian. The engagement was meant to be temporary. You said so yourself. You said it was merely a convenience, a way to escape the machinations of matchmaking mothers. You never intended to actually marry the girl." Georgiana's hand froze on her buttons. "The engagement was meant to be temporary. You never intended to actually marry the girl." "That was before," Sebastian said, but Georgiana barely heard him. Blood was rushing in her ears, drowning out everything except the dowager's words echoing in her skull. A convenience, a temporary arrangement, a way to escape. She had known that, of course. She had agreed to it. But hearing it spoken aloud, in the dowager's cutting tones, made it suddenly, devastatingly real. Sebastian had never intended to marry her, not at the beginning. Their engagement had been exactly what she had always known it was: a fiction, a performance, a transaction. And yes, things had changed. Yes, he had declared his love just an hour ago. Yes, she had believed him. But how could she trust it? How could she trust anything when the foundation of their relationship was built on pretense? "Lady Georgiana understands the arrangement perfectly," Sebastian was saying. "She has from the beginning, but I no longer want it to be temporary. I want—" Georgiana did not stay to hear what he wanted. She backed away from the door, her heart pounding, her vision blurring with tears. She did not think. She did not plan. She simply moved, driven by an instinct for self-preservation that had kept her alive through years of disappointment and betrayal. She found paper in the writing desk. She scrawled a note with shaking hands. "Your Grace, I release you from all obligation. The arrangement is concluded. I wish you every happiness. GB." She did not pack her trunks. She did not wake her mother or Edmund. She simply slipped out the back entrance, hailed a passing farmer's cart, and began the long journey back to London. By the time Sebastian discovered her absence, she was already miles away, watching the countryside blur past through tear-filled eyes, trying to convince herself she had done the right thing. She had spent her whole life being useful rather than loved. She had spent her whole life performing, adapting, becoming whatever other people needed her to be. And for one brief, shining moment, she had allowed herself to believe that Sebastian saw the real her, that he loved the real her, that their connection was genuine and not just another performance in a life full of performances. But she had been wrong. She had heard the truth with her own ears. The engagement was temporary. She was a convenience. And whatever Sebastian claimed to feel now, it had grown from false soil, planted in pretense rather than truth. How could she trust it? How could she trust anything, when she had never learned what it felt like to be loved for herself alone? The carriage rattled on toward London, and Georgiana pressed her hands to her face and wept for the love she was leaving behind, for the hope she was abandoning, for the woman she had almost allowed herself to become. The rain had not stopped for 3 days. Georgiana stood at the window of her godmother's townhouse in Mayfair, watching the grey curtain of water obscure the street below. The glass was cold against her fingertips, fogged with her breath, and she had been standing there so long that her reflection had become a ghost, pale, insubstantial, barely there at all. Lady Ashford had taken her in without question, asking only if she was well, and accepting Georgiana's trembling nod as sufficient answer. The elderly widow had been her mother's closest friend before marriage, and distance had separated them. And she possessed the rare gift of knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. For 3 days she had provided tea and warmth and comfortable rooms, and had not pressed for explanations Georgiana could not give. But she could not hide here forever. She knew that. The world would continue to turn, debts would continue to mount, and eventually she would have to emerge from this cocoon of grief and face whatever remained of her life. The door opened behind her, and Lady Ashford's soft voice broke the silence. "My dear, you have a visitor." Georgiana's heart seized. "I am not receiving." "I told him as much. He was insistent." Lady Ashford moved to stand beside her at the window, her wrinkled face gentle with concern. "The Duke of Ashworth is waiting in the drawing-room. He says he will wait all day if necessary, all week." "As long as it takes for you to speak with him." "I have nothing to say to him." "Perhaps not, but he seems to have a great deal to say to you." Lady Ashford touched her arm. "I do not know what passed between you, child. I do not need to know. But I have lived long enough to recognize a man in genuine distress, and that man is in genuine distress. Whatever you decide, I think you owe yourself the chance to hear what he has come to say." Georgiana closed her eyes. Behind her lids, she saw Sebastian's face in the library at Ashworth Park, the wonder in his eyes, the tremor in his voice when he had declared his love. She had believed him in that moment, completely, utterly. And then she had heard the dowager's words, and everything had crumbled. "I cannot trust him," she whispered. "I cannot trust that what he feels is real." "Why not?" "Because our engagement was never real. It was an arrangement, a transaction, a performance. How can I believe that his feelings are genuine when everything between us began as pretense? Lady Ashford was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. When I married Lord Ashford, it was an arranged match. Our families had been negotiating for years. I had met him perhaps 3 times before our wedding day, and none of those meetings had been particularly promising. He was stiff and formal, I was terrified and resentful, and neither of us expected anything from the marriage except mutual tolerance and the production of heirs. She smiled, her eyes distant with memory. But something happened, over time. We learned each other. We grew into each other. And by the time he died in my arms, after 43 years of marriage, I loved him more than I had ever thought it possible to love another human being. Not despite the false start, my dear, perhaps because of it. Because we had the chance to build something real from artificial foundations. That is different. Is it? Lady Ashford squeezed her arm. Love does not ask permission, child. It does not care about the circumstances of its birth. It simply arrives, uninvited and undeniable, and we must choose whether to welcome it or turn it away. She moved toward the door. The Duke is waiting. Whatever you decide it with open eyes and an honest heart. She left, and Georgiana stood alone at the window, watching the rain fall. The drawing room was warm despite the grey day, a fire crackling in the grate. Sebastian stood before it, his back to the door, his hands clasped behind him in that characteristic pose of controlled tension. He was still wearing his travelling clothes, mud-splattered boots, a greatcoat dark with rain, and his hair was dishevelled, as though he had been running his hands through it. He turned when she entered, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. He looked haggard, haunted, like a man who had not slept in days. Georgiana. Her name came out rough, ragged. Thank God. I thought I was afraid you would not see me. I almost did not. She remained by the door, maintaining distance. Lady Ashford can be very persuasive. I am grateful to her. He took a step toward her, then stopped, as though afraid of spooking a wild animal. I have been searching for you since the moment I discovered you had left. 3 days. 3 days of not knowing where you were, whether you were safe, whether I would ever see you again. I left you a note. You left me a dismissal. His voice cracked. A single line releasing me from obligation, as though everything between us was merely a contract to be dissolved, as though I had not declared my love to you mere hours before. I heard what your aunt said. The words came out harder than she intended. I heard her reminding you that our engagement was meant to be temporary, that you never intended to actually marry me. Sebastian's face went pale. You heard, Georgiana. You cannot have heard the entire conversation. You cannot have heard what I said in response. I heard enough. I heard that I was a convenience, an arrangement, a way to escape matchmaking mothers. She wrapped her arms around herself, holding in the pain. I always knew that, of course. It was the foundation of our bargain, but hearing it spoken aloud by someone who knew your true intentions, my true intentions changed. He crossed the room toward her, and this time he did not stop. He took her hands in his, and his grip was almost painfully tight. Yes, our engagement began as a fiction. Yes, I approached it as a transaction, a temporary arrangement that would benefit us both. But that is not what it became. That is not what you became to me. How can I believe that? Her voice broke. How can I trust that what you feel is real when everything between us was built on lies? Because I am telling you it is real. His grey eyes burned into hers. Because I have never lied to you about my feelings, Georgiana, not once. I told you from the beginning that I did not want marriage, did not believe in love, did not intend to bind myself to anyone. And then I told you in that library, with the morning light falling across your face, that everything had changed, that I loved you, that I wanted our engagement to be real. But I told my aunt the same thing. His hands tightened on hers. That is what you would have heard if you had stayed. I told her that my intentions had changed, that I loved you, that I intended to marry you not because of our arrangement, but in spite of it, because you had become essential to me, because the thought of losing you was unbearable. Tears were spilling down Georgiana's cheeks. She could not stop them. Sebastian, I know why you ran. His voice gentled, though his grip did not loosen. You have spent your entire life being useful rather than loved. You have been taught, by 1,000 small cruelties, that your value lies in what you can provide rather than who you are. And when you heard my aunt speak of arrangements and convenience, all those old wounds reopened. Yes, the word was barely a whisper. I understand. I understand because I have spent my own life running from vulnerability, convinced that love was a trap and connection was weakness. We are alike in that way, you and I. Both of us armored, both of us afraid. He released one of her hands to cup her face, his thumb brushing away tears. But I am tired of being afraid, Georgiana. I am tired of protecting myself from the very thing that might save me. And if I cannot stop being afraid, if I cannot trust, then I will wait. He said it simply, without hesitation. I will wait as long as it takes for you to believe me. I will prove myself to you every day, in every way I can think of, until you know in your bones that what I feel is real. I will not give up on you, Georgiana. I will not give up on us. She stared at him through her tears. This man who had been a stranger mere weeks ago, and who now felt like the other half of her soul. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. But the fear was so deeply rooted, so thoroughly ingrained. Show me, she whispered. Show me that you love me for who I am, not for what I can do for you. How? I do not know. But if what you feel is real, if it is truly real, then prove it. Not with words, not with declarations, with actions. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he released her and stepped back. There is something I need to tell you, he said. Something I should have told you before. About your family. About your father's debts. Her stomach clenched. What about them? When I agreed to our arrangement, I did not only deal with Whitmore, I dealt with all of it. Every creditor, every outstanding debt, every threat hanging over the Blackwell family. He met her eyes steadily. Your father owed more than you knew, Georgiana. Far more. Enough to destroy your family completely if it ever came to light. And you paid it all? I made it go away. I did not tell you because I did not want you to feel more obligated than you already did. I did not want you to stay with me out of gratitude rather than choice. Georgiana pressed her hand to her mouth. The magnitude of what he was describing, the freedom it represented, was almost too much to comprehend. That must have cost a fortune. It cost money. Money I have in abundance. He shrugged. I did not do it because I expected anything in return. I did it because your happiness mattered to me, even then. Even before I admitted to myself what I was feeling. Why are you telling me now? Because you asked me to prove my love with actions rather than words. And I want you to understand that I have been acting on my feelings for longer than either of us realized. He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded paper. This is the record of everything I settled on your family's behalf. I am giving it to you not as a claim on your affection, but as evidence. Evidence that my feelings are real, that they have been real for some time, that they will continue to be real regardless of what you decide. She took the paper with trembling hands, but did not open it. She did not need to. She could see the truth in his eyes, hear it in his voice, feel it in the careful way he maintained distance, giving her space to choose freely. "There is more," he said. "Your brother." "Edmund? What about Edmund?" "He disappeared from Ashworth Park the same night you did. I have been searching for him as well, and I found him last night, in a gambling hell in Cheapside." Her heart stopped. "Is he? He is alive. He is safe. I brought him here." Sebastian gestured toward the door. "He is waiting in the hall, if you want to see him." "You found him." She could barely form the words. "You searched for him, even while you were searching for me. He is your brother. He matters to you. Therefore, he matters to me." Sebastian's voice was quiet, firm. "I sat with him for 3 hours last night, Georgiana. I told him about my father, about what drink and gambling did to him, how it hollowed him out and left nothing but bitterness and regret. I told him about my mother, who loved my father despite everything, and who was destroyed by that love. And I told him that he had a choice, that he could follow the same path, or he could choose differently." "And what did he say?" "He wept, and then he asked me to help him." Sebastian's expression softened. "He is young, Georgiana. Young and lost and desperate to prove himself a man because he does not yet know what that means. He needs guidance, not judgment, and if you will permit me, I would like to provide it." The tears were flowing freely now, streaming down her face in rivers she could not control. This man, this impossible, infuriating, extraordinary man, had done everything she had asked, and more. He had not simply declared his love. He had demonstrated it, over and over, in ways both large and small. He had saved her brother. He had freed her family. He had waited for her, searched for her, refused to give up on her. And he had done it all without any guarantee that she would ever believe him. "Sebastian." His name came out broken, raw. You do not have to decide now." He cut her off gently. "You do not have to decide anything until you are ready. I meant what I said. I will wait, however long it takes." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the ghost duke or the convenient fiancé, or the cold aristocrat society believed him to be. She saw a man who had been as wounded as she was, as afraid as she was, and who had chosen to be brave anyway. She saw the man she loved. "I do not want you to wait," she said. "I am tired of waiting. I am tired of being afraid, of protecting myself, of running from the one thing that might make me happy." Hope flickered in his grey eyes. "Georgiana, I love you." The words came out strong and sure, surprising her with their certainty. "I have loved you since the night in the conservatory, since you kissed me for an audience that did not exist. I have loved you through every moment of our ridiculous arrangement, through every conversation and every silence and every look that meant more than it should have. Then marry me." He closed the distance between them, taking her hands again. "Really marry me. Not for arrangement or convenience or strategy, just because we love each other and life is too short and too precious to waste on fear." She laughed through her tears, bright, breathless, incandescent with joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, really marry you, for no reason except that I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Sebastian's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds after a storm. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, and she did not care. She buried her face against his chest, inhaling the sandalwood scent of him, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart against her cheek. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt it again." "I know." She tilted her face up to his. "I know you will." And when he kissed her soft and sweet and full of promise, she knew that this time it was real. This time there was no audience, no arrangement, no pretense. Just two people who had found each other against all odds and who had chosen to be brave. They married 3 weeks later in the small chapel at Ashworth Park. It was not the grand society wedding the Dowager had envisioned. There were no hundreds of guests, no elaborate decorations, no parade of aristocratic witnesses. Instead, there was family Edmund, pale but steady, standing as Sebastian's groomsman, Lady Ashford beaming from the front pew, even Lady Thornwood, roused from her laudanum haze for the occasion and weeping gentle tears of joy. Lady Arabella had sent a gracious letter of congratulation, along with a gift of crystal stemware and the news that she had accepted the proposal of a Scottish earl who appreciated her for herself rather than her pedigree. The Dowager Duchess had taken to her rooms with a convenient illness, but Georgiana suspected she would come around eventually. Sebastian's happiness was too evident to be denied, and the Dowager, whatever her faults, loved her nephew. Georgiana wore a gown of ivory silk, simple and elegant, with her mother's pearls at her throat. Sebastian wore his customary black, but there was nothing cold or forbidding about him today. He smiled at her as she walked down the aisle, a real smile, warm and unguarded, and she felt her heart overflow with a joy she had never thought possible. "I, Sebastian James Fairfax Cole, Duke of Ashworth, take thee, Georgiana Elizabeth Blackwell." His voice was steady, his grey eyes bright with unshed tears. He spoke his vows as though they were poetry, as though each word was a precious thing to be treasured and protected, to have and to hold from this day forward. Georgiana felt tears slip down her own cheeks as she made her responses. This was real. This was happening. She was marrying a man who loved her not for her usefulness or her adaptability or her ability to manage impossible situations, but for herself, for the woman she actually was. For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer. She thought of all the years she had spent performing, becoming whatever other people needed her to be. She thought of the girl who had stood in a moonlit conservatory, desperate and afraid, willing to sell herself for her family's safety. In sickness and in health, to love and to cherish. That girl was gone now. In her place was a woman who had learned what it felt like to be seen, to be known, to be loved for exactly who she was. Till death us do part. Sebastian slid the ring onto her finger, a band of gold set with a single sapphire that matched her eyes, and then, before the vicar could pronounce them man and wife, he leaned forward and whispered in her ear, "Someone's watching." She laughed, bright and startled, and when he kissed her soft and sweet and full of promise, she did not care who saw. 8 years later, the conservatory at Ashworth Park was full of light. Summer sun streamed through the glass ceiling, illuminating the tropical plants that had grown lush and wild under Georgiana's care. Sebastian had given her free rein with the space, and she had transformed it from a place of shadows and secrets into something bright and living, a jungle of green punctuated by explosions of colour, fragrant with blooms from 3 continents. It was her favourite room in the house, the place where she came to think, to read, to escape the beautiful chaos of their lives. Today, the chaos had followed her. "Mama! Mama, look!" Charlotte, their eldest at 7, came running through the ferns with something clutched in her small hands. She had her father's dark hair and her mother's hazel eyes, and she had inherited, to Sebastian's frequent dismay, her mother's talent for managing impossible situations. "What have you found, sweetheart?" "A caterpillar, a big green one. Papa says it will become a butterfly. but Thomas says he's lying. Papa never lies about butterflies. Georgiana examined the fuzzy creature with appropriate solemnity. And Thomas is 5. He does not yet understand the mysteries of metamorphosis. What's a metamorphosis? Metamorphosis. It means changing from one thing into something else entirely. She smiled at her daughter. Like how caterpillars become butterflies, or how strangers become friends, or how two people who barely know each other become a family. Charlotte considered this with the grave intensity of a 7-year-old philosopher. Is that what happened to you and Papa? Something like that, yes. Did you used to be a caterpillar? Georgiana laughed. In a manner of speaking. She was a very beautiful caterpillar. Sebastian's voice came from the doorway, warm with amusement. He stood there with Thomas on one hip and baby Eleanor in the crook of his other arm, looking for all the world like a man who had everything he had ever wanted. But she became an even more beautiful butterfly. Papa, that doesn't make sense, Charlotte informed him. Caterpillars are bugs. Mama is not a bug. A fair point. Perhaps we should abandon the metaphor. He crossed the conservatory and deposited their brood onto the nearby bench with practiced ease. Edmund has arrived, by the way. He is in the drawing room with the accounts from the Yorkshire estate. Edmund. Georgiana's heart swelled with pride. Her brother had been sober for 6 years now, ever since that terrible night in the gambling hell when Sebastian had found him and offered him a choice. He managed one of the family's smaller estates, had married a sensible young woman named Clara, and had become the kind of man Georgiana had always known he could be. Their father had died 2 years ago, leaving nothing but debts that Sebastian had quietly settled without ever telling her. She had discovered it by accident, a letter from a solicitor, a reference to payments made, and when she had confronted him, he had simply shrugged and said that he did not keep score with the people he loved. Her mother had rallied after the Earl's death, freed from the shadow of his failures. She lived in a comfortable cottage on the Ashworth estate, tending her garden and spoiling her grandchildren, and slowly returning to something like her old self. The Dowager Duchess had died 3 years ago, at peace with her nephew's choice at last. In her final months, she had admitted to Georgiana that she had been wrong that Sebastian had never been happier, and that perhaps love, after all, was not the trap she had always believed it to be. Lady Arabella, now the Countess of Inverness, sent letters from Scotland full of happiness and the chaos of her own growing family. Her husband adored her, her children adored her, and she and Georgiana had become, improbably, friends. The years had been kind, kinder than Georgiana had ever dared to hope. "What are you thinking about?" Sebastian asked, settling onto the bench beside her, while their children explored the conservatory with the destructive enthusiasm of the very young. "Everything." She leaned against his shoulder. "Nothing. How different my life is from what I imagined it would be. Better different, I hope." She tilted her face up to look at him. This man she had married for a pretense and come to love beyond all reason. There were threads of silver in his dark hair now, fine lines at the corners of his grey eyes. He was 40, distinguished, still occasionally referred to as the Ghost Duke by those who remembered his cold and solitary years. But he was not cold now. He was warm and alive and hers, and she loved him more with each passing day. "Better," she confirmed. "So much better I cannot even describe it." He smiled that slow, beautiful smile she had first seen in the library at Ashworth Park, when he had finally let her see the man beneath the mask. "I have something for you," he said. "Sebastian, you are always giving me things. I do not need more things. This is not a thing. It is—" He hesitated, uncharacteristically nervous. "A confession, I suppose. Something I should have told you long ago." She straightened, curiosity piqued. "What confession?" He reached into his coat and withdrew a small leather-bound book. She recognized it immediately. It was the journal he kept in his study, the one he wrote in late at night when he thought she was sleeping. "You know I write," he said. "You have never asked what I write. I assumed you would tell me when you were ready. I am ready now." He pressed the book into her hands. "This is poetry. Terrible poetry for the most part, but some of it is about you, and I thought you might want to read it." Georgiana opened the book with reverent hands. Sebastian's handwriting filled the pages, elegant, cramped, intimate. She read the first poem, then the second, then the third. "She came to me in moonlight, a stranger bearing storms, and asked me for a kindness that wore 100 forms. I gave her what she needed, and she gave back much more, a reason to keep breathing, a key to every door. I did not know I needed a heart to call my own until she held it gently and made my house a home." Tears blurred her vision. She turned the pages, reading poem after poem about their courtship, their marriage, their children. Sebastian had been writing about her for years, recording every moment of their love in verse that ranged from clumsy to beautiful, from sad to joyful, from desperate to peaceful. He had been documenting their metamorphosis, their transformation from strangers into soulmates. "Sebastian," her voice broke on his name. This is terrible, I know. I am not a natural poet. This is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me." He exhaled relief and love and something like wonder, all tangled together. "I wanted you to know," he said quietly. "I wanted you to see, in my own words, what you have meant to me, what you still mean to me, what you will always mean." She set the book aside and took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "I love you," she said. "I have loved you since the night in the conservatory, since you kissed me for an audience that did not exist. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I know." He covered her hands with his own. "I know, because I feel the same way. Because you are my home, Georgiana. You are the place I return to when the world is too much. You are the reason I learned how to be happy." Charlotte chose that moment to reappear, caterpillar still in hand, with Thomas and Eleanor in chaotic pursuit. "Mama! Papa! The caterpillar escaped! I need help finding it!" Sebastian groaned. Georgiana laughed. "Go help Charlotte with her caterpillar," she told him. "I will be along in a moment." He kissed her soft and sweet and full of 8 years of love, and then waded into the green chaos of their family, scooping up Eleanor before she could topple into a potted fern. Georgiana watched him go. This man she had met in a moonlit conservatory, this stranger she had asked to kiss her when no one was watching. Someone was watching now. 3 someones, small and loud and demanding, with their father's grey eyes and their mother's stubborn heart. And somewhere in the wings, she knew, were all the others who had witnessed their unlikely love story, Edmund, Lady Ashford, even the ghost of the Dowager, who had finally understood that love was not a trap, but a transformation. She picked up Sebastian's journal and held it against her heart. Years ago, she had begged a stranger to kiss her because she thought someone was watching. He had kissed her anyway, even when no one was there, and from that single moment of desperate pretense had grown something real and lasting and extraordinary. A home, a family, a love that had transformed them both. Georgiana smiled, tucked the journal under her arm, and went to join her husband and children in the sun-drenched conservatory. No one was watching, but that was all right. These days, she kissed him anyway.